Hello and welcome to another edition of the Purple Theory Podcast. My name is Grant McGalliard. I have alongside with me my friend and co-host, Parker Fleming, as always. Parker, how's it going, bud?
Going great, man. How about that transition to get in here? I felt
how about
pretty good about it. The music's playing again.
Music? Yeah.
It's very fun. No, doing all right. Been a week. It's about all I can say. But here we are.
Okay. All right. Well, that's kind of ominous, but I'm not gonna, you do whatever you need to, man. I will say I had a plan this weekend to go to my family's ranch house in Midfield, Texas. I don't know if you're aware. I was going to write some songs. I was going to do et cetera, et cetera. The air conditioning is out. So I have a day off on Friday with nothing to do. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, what is there to do in Bay City except get in trouble? So,
well, I play a lot of golf.
Yeah.
But this is the Iowa State preview episode. But before we get into talking about the Cyclones, got to do two things. Number one, mention that we are part of the Republic of Football Podcast Network. Shout out to everybody at Dave Campbell's. And two, big news came out. NCAA football 2024 comes out next summer. Were you a frequent player? Did you take part in the NCAA football universe?
Okay, so not as much as other. You know what I did? I had the YouTube on right there because I was looking at the comments and trying to do the metrics as well, and the audio just came and got me. So we're still working on technical difficulties. In terms of playing NCAA, I did a little bit. I never had a console growing up. In the fraternity house, we would play, and I kept a little spreadsheet that was our league, and we did that maybe 1 year or something, but never anything that I had a long-standing relationship with. Just kind of played here and there. So excited about it, but I will couch this discussion in saying that this will not move the needle for me on my life at all. The new game coming out.
Well, way to be a wet blanket. We kind of did a similar thing in the fraternity house I lived in, but it was just with FIFA, the soccer game. I will say, is there an athlete, any player from NCAA that you remember being a cheat code, guy that couldn't be beat, anything like that?
See, I always liked to run the triple option. I like to be Alabama and run the triple option. I can't even remember. I'm so lame. I can't even remember who I would play with. I think that what we did was something crazy. We did a draft, and so I ended up being Memphis, but then drafting guys. And God help me, I can hardly remember. Again, I'm totally just throwing a complete glass of cold water on this conversation.
Yeah, this blows, here. Man. This is.
I'm trying to yes fun. And, but I just didn't play NCAA very much.
Okay.
Ryan Mallett was my cheat code, and
I do remember running the triple out of the I formation with North Carolina in NCAA 2008. I think I remember Brian Brom from Louisville. You just couldn't bat down any of his passes. He was a gunslinger. He would always make trouble for me. And then I remember NCAA 06, the soundtrack got me into NoFX, got me into a lot of punk music. So I have a special bond with that video game. Excited to see what happens next year. So hopefully it's not just a re-engineered Madden engine. Anyway.
I'm worried that so I think the homies at Smoking Musket tweeted this out, and I retweeted it today, but it was I want to get excited, but until EA makes a non-terrible video game, I'm not gonna trust it. And I'm pretty sure that I would be worried that what they're gonna do is put Madden and change the logos and the player names, and then just funnel you towards microtransactions. In this day and age, I'm so skeptical about them working on the main gameplay being fun and the Dynasty online stuff being fun, and more so funneling you toward the parts of the game where you can buy packs to get better players and yada yada.
Yeah, Matt Brown does great research, and interviews on this. He's if you want to know what's going to happen in NCAA, follow Matt Brown on Twitter. But I'm hoping that it's just not going to be a reskin of Madden into college football. And I think so much of the appeal of the original NCAA games were, hey, I'm going to recruit the hell out of Southern Mississippi and take them to 5 straight national championships. So I hope they maintain that ethos moving forward. Parker, you want to talk about the Cyclones? Man, this in the original Purple Theory podcast, this was the team that I think you hated on the most.
In a very narrow capacity, and mostly because of a couple things. One, their one good season was the COVID year where they allegedly flaunted some COVID rules, and allegedly. Like didn't. Yeah. Never had one of those games where they played like 40 men to, like where they only had 40 guys on the roster or something. There a bunch of 1-score games there too. And two, because like it literally was just like at the time a six weirdos. And as my following kind of got bigger, I was like, okay, I'm going to stop entertaining this. But like there were people who just say terrible, terrible things to you at the first sign of criticism of Matt Campbell. So like, I'll even tweet that now about like, oh, they have a special teams miscue. That's an Iowa State thing, and someone get it. Or like the whole thing about Matt Campbell not having an agent, not that he wasn't pursuing other jobs, but he doesn't have an agent, and it's bad of you to say he has an agent because all he has is actually a lawyer who looks at his contracts, but he doesn't have an agent. And just like the weird sticking points of things that people would say are so odd to me. But then it got weirdly personal, and I was like, I don't want to be involved with this anymore, so I kind of walked away from that. But
it was very holier than thou, is the best way I can put it. To be like, oh, our coach doesn't even have an agent. He's doing it all on his own. He has no ego.
It's like, my dude, how do you think that like people talk about Matt Campbell as a candidate for USC? Like that doesn't just come from anywhere,
Yeah.
Or come from nowhere. So anyway, I think that's all that to say, funny, but also something that I'm just not interested in that particular, class of weirdos. But there are some cultists for Iowa State, which is interesting because they were bad for very, very long, and they were kind of decent once, and a lot of people just took that inch and tried to make it into a couple miles there. So as we turn to Iowa State, I think that's what's interesting to kind of couch it in, is like they have been better than they have been historically.
Sure.
But this is we'll talk about their 2022. Like they're in a really weird position where you start to ask yourself, like, did Matt Campbell raise the ceiling to that like 9-3 2020 thing? Or did he just like slightly increase the floor? And what do we do about that? Like, because at some point there's a reason that he is still at Iowa State.
Yeah.
Right.
I think, I think the question is almost, did he raise the ceiling too high? Right. To where it's like, hey, they won 10 games, all, kind of qualifiers aside. They did win 10 games or whatever it was. Or 9?
No, that's the whole thing. Iowa State has never had a 10-win game, 10 win season.
Christ.
Even with all of that, their best season, Grant, was just 9-3 in COVID year.
We try to be optimistic on these podcasts. That's horribly depressing.
It's very sad, and they've been really bad. And that's like early on, I feel like a lot of people were kind of trying to dunk on Matt Campbell because they were like, oh my gosh, he's 8-5 or whatever. Like, you don't understand how terrible these teams were under Gene Chizik and Paul Rhodes. I mean, like awful, just abysmal seasons. And a little bit 2020 looked like one of those abysmal seasons.
Sure.
Or 2022 rather. And so we can talk about the 2022, but like, it's very important to have a well-calibrated sense of expectations, much like for Kansas. I'm not putting them on the same level of like destitution, but in terms of like haves and have-nots, Iowa State is still firmly in the have-nots. And when we talk about them, and we'll try to talk ourselves into some of these units,
some of us will.
We just have to remember, like, what is good for Iowa State? And I think what's good for Iowa State is like consistently flirting with a bowl and getting there more years than they're not. So 2022 they ended a 5-year bowl streak. That's great. That's amazing. 5 out of 6 years for a bowl is not something they had done. They missed the bowl for 4 seasons before that. And I think that they can kind of say, if we're going to a bowl most years and then every once in so often going to a good bowl, that's going to be really, really kind of the wheelhouse for Iowa State consistently.
Yeah. I guess my point earlier talking about Matt Campbell setting the bar too high is, hey, okay, so you win 9 games in 2020. And now national expectations for people that don't know the history of Iowa State and don't know how you use the word destitution kind of close to that level, where that program has been. Now it's like, all right, well, show me more. Are you going to win 10? Are you going to win 11 games, etc.?
Yeah.
And then meanwhile,
that's how you get into a situation where like FPI has you in 3 of the top 5 most likely playoff simulations, and you go 7-6.
That's not going to happen. And then you have Matt Campbell, who doesn't have an agent, to make that clear, but is also very clearly angling for bigger program jobs.
Is he? He got linked to Notre Dame. Listen to this.
That's my take.
He got linked to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
He got linked to USC. And then last year he was linked to the Cincinnati job. I don't think there's anyone. His people called TCU about the opening.
Yeah. I want to make this very clear. He should not look for a different job because he is in the sweet spot in Ames where he can win 8 games forever.
If he can win 8 games for forever, but like you heard people talk, like they're not going to be as good this year, and we'll get to that. But like you heard people already talking about Campbell, and not in the sense that we're talking about Campbell, like, hey, was the COVID year an outlier, and maybe this isn't like college football's rising star, but more people like Matt Campbell can't do it anymore. And like the tide is precocious, I think, in terms of turning on precarious, in terms of turning or potentially turning on Matt Campbell. And so I think that like if he had lost two more losing seasons in a row, they're going to have a conversation.
I think there's a really great question to be had, and we probably should have researched this thought about it more before we did this podcast. But you say Matt Campbell can't do it anymore. My major question is, what is it?
Well, it is what you're talking about with like the people saw a 9-3 2020 beat Oklahoma, win the Fiesta Bowl, and think, okay, he's going to climb to the top of the world. But it's looking increasingly more like that was the outlier season, and there's some pretty big reasons why that might be the case.
Yeah, and his brand of football, and we'll get into this, is bland enough and kind of vanilla enough where it can be anything you want it to be. But so let's get into our preview. We have this nice Google document here, and it'd be a shame if we didn't read into it.
That's very
if you don't mind, I'll read some comments from Matt Campbell from Spring Ball.
Yeah.
So it's this is a quote. It's going to be 43 degrees, and we're going to keep it pretty simple. This is before the game. Nothing Saturday will tell you if we'll be good or not. But I think that what I've seen is that this group has really grown in terms of the areas that take no talent to get better. That is a word salad that I, as an editor in real life, appreciate a ton. That means nothing.
Yeah. What is, like, I understand talking about intangibles, but it does feel vaguely like politician stump speech, and not so much in the, hey, this is a typical thing that a coach says during spring. Like Lance Leipold last week, we were talking about, he was like, we're physical, or whatever. He said something. Yeah. This feels like mealy mouthed almost, just trying to say something for the sake of saying something, but not really having something to say.
Yeah, if you watch Succession, it's the Conor Roy. Conor Roy was interested in politics from a very young age. That's what that quote is. It means nothing and is nothing.
Will you stop trying to relate things to pop culture just so people will like it?
How many Parks and Recreation references, a show that I have not seen, do you continue to make on this damn podcast? Quoting Hunter Deckers here, because now I'm mad at Parker. Quoting Hunter Deckers, I would just say that the whole mindset that everyone has this spring is just completely different. We thought last year that we were working hard, but this year we've just taken it to a whole new level.
This year we're hardly working.
Nothing. Nothing. That means nothing. And the spring game recap from Matt Campbell. A collective win for our program. Both our offense and our defense played poorly. That's what that means.
Yeah. So again, the golden rule of spring is like if one unit looks great, that means the other unit's terrible.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. For instance, like one of the reports I saw from spring was that like the offensive line played great, and Iowa State lost 2 NFL defensive ends last year. So yeah, it makes sense that their offensive line is playing a little bit better in spring. But I think some of those are interesting. Like, I mean, it was 43 degrees and like, it's hard to do spring football up north. And so, it can only mean what it can mean. Maybe there's some development issues with them not being able to practice as much and not being able to play a full game. But generally I sensed out of Campbell's comments, less conviction and a little bit more general optimism, which speaks, and again, this might be reading too much into this, and I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but leads me more towards he's frustrated with the last 2 seasons being underwhelming and isn't 100% sure why they happened like they did. As opposed to, hey, got a clear vision, understand why we're not getting that vision. And you know what? They're talking about goals. Maybe that's what he means with the goals. Maybe he does have that clear vision, but kind of interesting to see where they're at with some of those post-spring comments, which again only mean what they mean. Grant, let's look at their 2022 and turn backwards before we get into these. 4-8. That was the worst record since Matt Campbell's first year, 2016. They went 3-9. They did beat Iowa for the first time since 2014, the first under Matt Campbell. But in some ways, to beat Iowa, they had to become Iowa. We'll talk about that with their points for
Kansas, 14-11.
14-11, and they lost.
Not a real score.
Not great. Not great. They're 3-7 in their last 10 against the Hawkeyes. They're 1-5 against the Hawkeyes against Campbell. I only focus on that because for a team that's not going to be nationally competitive consistently, that is in a Midwestern team. That's a pretty big benchmark of like, if Matt Campbell beat Iowa 3 out of 5 years, I don't think they would care what he was doing elsewhere. So I think that's an interesting bellwether to kind of keep your thumb on while you're talking about this team. They ended a 5-season bowl streak, like I mentioned earlier. They were 1-8 in the Big 12. That's last in the Big 12. That's the fewest conference wins under Campbell. That is the 3rd worst conference season since 2000 for the Cyclones in terms of winning percentage. It's not great. They started out 3-0. Granted, they played an FCS team. Granted, they played Ohio, a MAC team as well. And they finished 1-8 in that stretch of 1-8. Grant, they were outscored 24-16.3 per game. If you cut TCU's score in half, TCU beat them 62 to whatever. That's huge. If you cut that in half as an outlier, it's 20.6 to 16.3. They beat some decent teams. They beat a 9-3 FCS team, 8-5 Iowa, 10-4 Ohio. Decent college, decent.
Okay, I mean 5-7 WVU is the only Big 12 team.
They are not a decent team.
No, they stunk like out loud. Yeah. Points for Iowa State, 116th. They 200 points. That is not a lot of points.
That's not a lot of points. That's not enough points.
That's a great way to phrase it. It's not enough points. The defense was good, 23rd in the country, allowed 233, but that's a negative 3-point differential. So 81st best, to use a word that shouldn't apply to Iowa State in anything. In the country. They just kind of stunk. I mean, 21.2 points allowed is 4th in the Big 12. Great. Their defense is fine. But they only scored 18.2, and that's the worst in the conference. And again, this was a conference that included West Virginia. 2022 West Virginia. Very, very bad. They did, and you have this note here, and I do appreciate it, have a better point differential than Kansas.
Which is wild.
Yeah, because Kansas was a better team than Iowa State last year.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Absolutely, more fun, absolutely wild. Kansas was definitely more fun. I think the defense of Iowa State and the offense of Kansas would have been a very, very good team last year. I'm inclined to believe.
Meet each other and go out, go get some coffee, talk.
Yeah. In terms of expected win percentage, just based on points scored and points allowed, 0.414 win percentage. That's 13th out of the 14 Big 12 teams. Their actual win percentage is 0.272, which is 11th. That difference between those two was negative 0.142, which is the biggest difference, the biggest negative difference between expectation and reality. So again, that suggests that we weren't projecting them to be great, but not necessarily indicative of them being abysmal, but they underperformed regardless there. So really, really tough. We should note, and we'll talk about this in the offense, like Tyrell Brock got hurt and they couldn't run the football to save their lives. And so like that dramatically changed their season, but we'll talk about that instinctively. So it's not just when like everything was a failure. It was like things weren't great. And then their running back got hurt and they didn't have an offensive line and just couldn't do anything. And really were kind of feckless towards the end. So really ran out of gas. That TCU blowout at the end of the season is kind of emblematic of like, dude, we just don't care anymore. Which not typical of a Matt Campbell team, I think ideally. But perhaps just emblematic of like it's hard when you're losing and kind of getting blown out at the end of the game. They all of their losses except that TCU game were 1-score losses, so they were in every game even if they were frustrating, and arguably should have won some of those, like the Texas game, the Kansas State game. There's a couple just absolutely, the Kansas game even, there's a couple opportunities missed here and there that were just absolutely heartbreaking for Iowa State.
I like the word feckless. I think it kind of summarizes the offense, but we will get to that in a minute. Parker, you want to talk about recruiting real quick? Iowa State's 7th in the Big 12. They have 1 4-star QB, JJ Cole out of Ankeny. You have that note. Where the hell is Ankeny?
No, Ankeny.
Iowa. Excuse me. Oh, in Iowa. Okay. Well,
yeah.
I know 2 cities.
He's a big
in
kid.
Iowa. I guess I know 3: Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, and Ames. So
Iowa City, that's 4. Martinsdale, that's 5.
Well, I don't know what the hell Martinsdale is. But they do have 7 Iowa kids.
Council Bluffs,
Max Duggan's hometown. Council Bluffs Common. They were 39th in 2022. They were 59th in 2021. And there's, I guess, some hope there in terms of, hey, they improved by 12 spots. But I don't necessarily trust Matt Campbell as a recruiter to the program.
He's not going to bring in a blue chip ratio of 25 or anything. They're working with what they're working with in the recruiting. I think the issue there is just making sure that the bottom isn't too low, especially with the new guys in the Big 12 who will get a recruiting bump. You just got to make sure that talent differential is not so great that you can't overcome it, which it had been in the past. But I think they're still firmly in the, like, this roster is not garbage. It's not great, but it's not garbage.
Disagree, but at certain positions. I also want to make a note before we delve into offense defense. Iowa State has the worst roster website of any team in the Big 12. It's like their entire operation is bad. It's hard to navigate. It's
crazy because don't most of the teams use like the same 2 or 3 providers, and they just like don't use one of those providers, and so it's bad. Yeah,
like West Virginia weirdly has a guy that like writes actual analysis about West Virginia football, and they put it on the website, which I enjoy. But Iowa State's is just hard to navigate. I'm just getting that on the record.
Didn't West Virginia cite us on their website? Do you remember that? That was like 2019.
Yeah, they did. And I'm like, wow, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
All right.
That was like the Baylor. Grant texted me before this podcast and was like, dude, can we just like, let's be efficient? And I'm going to go down a rabbit trail here. But like 2019, maybe 2021, the Baylor SID was like, hey, can I quote this stat that you brought up about like returning starters? And I said, yes, but you have to put my name and my Twitter account in there. And he said, okay. And he didn't put my Twitter account. So he's canceled.
Well, screw them. Parker, let's get down the basics. You have your nerd stats here. Tell us about the Iowa State offense before we go deeper into position groups.
Yeah, Iowa State offense. 76% returning production. That's 28th overall. And I think that's pretty dang good considering they're losing an NFL wide receiver in Xavier Hutchinson and the fact that Jairell Brock was hurt. I think that should be considered a strength. Returning production, they're losing one lineman, but aside from that, should be a pretty strong unit. They were 101st in EPA per play on offense, 67th against the pass, 124th in the rush. They did rush 9.8 percentage points less than the average team. So
yeah,
really inefficient run game. And they didn't run a lot. Like they just could not run the ball to save their life. Two things that I think are really
not there. Your boy,
you lose Breece Hall, man. Bad things happen. Really, really interesting note. A couple things. One, they were 96th in echo rate. So in generating quality possessions, they just did not give themselves a lot of opportunities. And then they squandered those opportunities, which is particularly frustrating given how close some of these games were. Like 5 of 6 losses were 4 and 8, 7 of 8 losses were one-score losses. Yeah. 99th in points per quality possession, 3.51. Grant, that means when they got a first down inside the opponent 40, they were averaging 3.51 points. That's not enough. That's not good. They could not score to save their lives. They're early. And then the other thing is early downs EPA. You're passing a ton, right?
Yeah.
And you're not very efficient in the run game. You're 120th on early downs EPA. What happens when you get behind the chains? You get in worse passing situations. It's going to bring your passing efficiency down. It's just kind of a vicious cycle there because it's not even like, oh, they needed a star running back. It was like, dude, they couldn't even run the ball to get 3 yards. Like it was just absolutely nothing there on the run game. 124th in rushing success rate, 31.2, less than 1 in 3 runs was successful. That's not the plan. That's not the plan. That's not how it's supposed to go for Iowa State. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get to that later just in terms of what the running back core looks like and what the weapons they have available. But this was an offense that was struggling for an answer. I think probably leaning heavily on Hunter Deckers. Again, we'll get to him very soon. But this was not a functional offense in any sense of the word.
They still passed reasonably well, but not well enough to dig them out of this just cataclysmic hole. Like you just can't raise a run game from the dead with Hunter Deckers, I think is the way to say that.
We're trying to be nice, and even still, it's tough.
This is the postmortem. We can be mean about last year because we're going to be nice about. We're going to talk ourselves into them this year.
I'm not, but this coaching staff has 2. I want to get to this. 2 Purple Theory podcast favorites. Number 1, Kyle Kemp, if you remember him from Iowa State.
Shout out to the GOAT. Computer science major, super nice guy.
Just nice guy. Jake Waters, Kansas State legend.
Interesting.
The opposing quarterback in the 2014 Trevon Boykin,
the Boykin flip game.
Yeah. That's wild, man.
That is a college football staff. Yeah, I noticed that a couple times that Deckers went off and was talking to somebody on the sideline as I was watching games. And I was like, dude, who is that guy? And then I realized, it's Kyle Kemp. I know who that was. And so, that's pretty fun.
Well, like having Jake Waters on staff was like, all right, well, just throw it to a fast guy. That's kind of what Jake did. And, it worked out.
Or run into wide open space. I mean, it's not.
It's not complicated, man. Just do what I did. Iowa State's returning production.
Grant, I'd like to say that I could probably beat anyone in NCAA if I had Jake Waters and what's his name? The wide receiver, Tyler Lockett. I could do Waters and Tyler Lockett, and I could beat anybody in NCAA.
I like that. I would take Taylor Rudolph and James Washington, or not Taylor Rudolph. That's Mason Rudolph. Taylor Cornelius and James Washington.
UConn Cornelius and Junkyard Jim. Yes.
Yeah. They could beat anybody. Anyway, Iowa State. Their return production 67th overall, 63%, 76% on offense, and that includes losing Xavier Hutchinson, who is now a Houston Texan. And I have great joy in knowing that he is on our roster, and 51% return production on defense. That's 95th in the country. So for a team that has done well on the defensive side of things, this is what you want to be in. But I still have questions about talent, and we'll get to that later. But
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to do some stuff with the offense for sure. But I would much rather have to trust turnover on the defense with this program than have to trust turnover on the offense.
But I this spoiler alert for our listeners. This is probably the one team that Parker and I disagree with the most.
I haven't even looked at your ratings. I want to see where you have them.
Very, very, very low. So
we'll see what they can do. They brought in they promoted coordinator Nate Scheelhaus, Illinois quarterback legend. He's one of two Big Ten players in history to have 8,000 passing yards and 2,000 rushing yards. Love that little fun fact for his bio.
Yeah.
He's wide receivers coach a little bit. He's a running backs coach for a little bit. They credit him with developing David Montgomery, but whatever. That is what it is. They basically came to a point with Tom Manning where they just felt like they couldn't do anything. He couldn't even use the tools they had, couldn't get anything going. So they parted ways. He's back in the NFL. And there's a lot of hope that Scheelhaus, with a little bit more of an offensive aggression mindset, could really help this offense, along with the offensive line coach Ryan Clanton, who was the Northern Iowa offensive coordinator and line coach. He is responsible for Trevor Penning and Spencer Brown, who was a first round and a third round offensive line pick from the FCS ranks. And that offense was pretty hardcore. So we'll talk about Clanton more, but it does feel like Campbell at least tried to get a breath of fresh air. I think on our coaching podcast, I mentioned, I don't know about an internal promotion when the offense is this bad, but bringing in Clanton too, I think is going to be really, really a good way to address some of their needs.
Yeah. So Iowa State kind of runs this scheme, and I think I alluded to it earlier, but it's very vanilla, right?
In the past, we've called it like the vanilla spread.
Yeah, right. And I don't even know if you have a coordinator that's talented, gifted, etc., how much you can improve on the scheme that Matt Campbell wants to run. They did pass a hell of a lot last year. Decker's had almost 100 more attempts than anyone else in the Big 12. Part of that is because of game state, right? So they were down a bunch. Decker's had the pass. Part of that is because Jaleel Brock was hurt, and they don't have any running backs. But when they do run, it's outside zone. It's nothing innovative. So it's a very conservative offense, and I don't like it. I'll put it that way. But that's kind of the overview of what Iowa State does with the ball.
Yeah, and rewatching a little bit of it, I kind of tried to move away from calling it like boring, because I think in some ways it is.
But it is. But that's the thing.
But Parker. If I tried to watch, it's like I tried to do the chess match thing and be like, all right, how do I watch this in a way that kind of tries to highlight what they're doing? And they do a lot of like leverage motion, especially in the run game, but that's more historical. Last year they couldn't execute very well. But like the Texas game, Iowa State versus Texas, I'm going to talk about that a lot because that's kind of Iowa State at their best last season, I think. And there was a lot of sets where, because Deckers is left-handed, the defense is a little bit off kilter. You motion a guy into leverage, and then they lose Xavier Hutchinson. And Deckers gets in a reasonable window. So like, I think it's a lot more about leverage and balance. I think it's a little bit more pre-snap strategic than perhaps what we're used to with college offenses, and a little bit more, not as funky as Kansas's motion, but more so in the sense that like Deckers is going to have maybe two reads. He's not going to be running this like RPO pop pass somersault, bazooka offense. Like he's going to be running, hey, here's the play. We're going to line up. We're going to get leverage. We're going to execute it. It is football with a capital F, I think is how I would frame that.
I'll ask you this. Do you think Matt Campbell just wants to be Chris Kleiman?
I don't know why he wouldn't want to be Chris Kleiman.
Well,
he's not
an as good, but I know. I just feel like the offense is kind of similar in terms of, hey, we have no athletes and we're going to try to get them in space, but Iowa State does it just much worse than Kansas State does.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to look at that, especially when we consider like Deckers and Howard as we watch Kansas State whenever we do that preview.
Yeah.
So I think let's file that away because those are two teams like developmentally that want to be the same. And one of them is certainly recently outpacing the other, even though the templates are the same.
Sure.
But I'm not sure enough. I haven't watched them in relief enough to make a strong statement about that. I've leaned towards no, but college offense is college offense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there are a couple
Fair
key
enough.
questions though as we look at this offense. It's like the formula is not going to change. They're not going to come out and run the veer and shoot or something. Like it's not going to go crazy, right?
Right.
There's a couple questions as they do this. One, will a healthy Brock matter? How much is that going to help having any running back, let alone no running backs? Can they and with that, can they finish drives? Can they start scoring touchdowns more often than field goals when they get those quality possessions? That last year was a huge problem. They couldn't do that. How much can the offensive line improve in a year? They're going to have to make huge strides. Grant, I sent you, I think, 3 screenshots in the last week of a pass rush play where different linemen were literally on their ass. And you just can't have that happen. Like you can't do that. And lastly, I think is kind of a looming question that might be a little more message boardy than I want it to be, but like, what's the leash on Deckers before you bring this Cole kid in? We're going to talk about him.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to me because like, this is, I once heard someone say that, who is it? John Mulaney does a bit where he says like, this was in like 2012. He was like, Donald Trump is a homeless man's idea of a no, not this one. He's like a homeless man's idea of what a rich person is. Like, when I get rich, I'm gonna have feathered hair and put my name on hotels, whatever. And a little bit, this backup kid that they brought in is like a middle school quarterback's ideal college quarterback because he's just like this big dude. And so we'll talk about him. But like at some point, if the offense doesn't go, when you have Brock, if the offensive line's got a little better, you gotta switch them out and see what happens. So I'm interested in that. All right, we're at 37 minutes and we haven't even started talking about a unit. I think that's worse than Kansas.
Let's
literally, you texted me today and said keep it snappy, and I am just refusing. I apologize. Let's get into the quarterbacks.
Let's get into quarterbacks. Hunter Deckers. You and I have different opinions about Hunter. I will review the stats and then hold on. I will read this. Hold on. I will read you the stats and then we'll discuss. So 56.4 QBR quarterback ratings. That's 71st in the country. 52.3%. 52.3 rating passing. That's 34th. And negative 3.5 rushing. That is 114. It's also bad at avoiding sacks, negative 17.5. That's 94th.
He's not good at it.
He is not good at it. So he aims small and misses small. So you have a point on this, and I want to allow you space to build your argument before I destroy it. So go ahead.
Okay, so I think that Deckers had to force a lot here.
Okay.
Given the offensive line play. I think he absolutely has the potential to hit the big throws, 15 big time throws. That's 3.2%. That's 9th in the Big 12. And his turnover worthy plays were 2.5%, which was 12th out of 12. Like that's the best out of the Big 12. Like he did not put it in harm's way a ton. But the average depth of target was only 7.5. That's last in the Big 12. 74.2 adjusted completion percentage, which is 5th. So it kind of comes down to, could they really run the offense that they wanted to run? Was he even in a position to make the reads he needed to make and actually get in a position where we could evaluate him? Or was he just trying to not get sacked every play?
Right.
Which is an important distinction with a young quarterback. Another argument in his favor, Grant, 26 drops.
That's a lot of drops. 8% of his passes.
First in the Big 12 and 7th, first overall in the Big 12. In total drops and in yards lost to drops, but that's 4th in drop rate. Still a lot there. And he had the most sacks taken, but he actually had the most pressure dropbacks. Again, an argument in his favor.
Yeah, because the offensive line
sack was 17.4%. That's 9th. That's again, lower is better there. So 9th is better. And and he's still negative 17.5 expected points added because of stacks. That's a hard situation. It's a hard situation. Dude's fighting for his life.
Have you seen the tape, Parker? It's bad. Like he makes a lot of really bad decisions. My theory on
this is that this is left-handed discrimination.
So I thought about that.
It looks funky. It does.
It does look funky. I will say he takes forever to throw the damn ball in terms of his windup and in terms of his decision making. He is a slow quarterback.
And is that like mental? I don't know. Is that?
I don't know.
I honestly, I don't know. I think there's something to be said about what it looks like to go left and right that just throws me. It really is so confusing to me.
No, it's very dumb.
And so maybe I'm overcompensating, right?
I agree with you. It's very dumb, but I feel the same way. And it looks unnatural, but get past that. I mean, Michael Vick got the ball out quickly, right? He was left-handed.
Time to throw. Deckers is 2.61, which was 11th. So short being lower, 11th in the Big 12. But that doesn't say anything about his release, which I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the release that bothers me. It's a windup. Do you remember when Tim Tebow was a NFL quarterback and not a Major League Baseball outfielder?
Boy, do I. That's playoff winner, Tim Tebow. So
that specific throw he made against the Steelers in the playoffs, that's how Hunter Deckers throws the ball every damn time. And it kills
me. It is a little odd.
It is odd. He does rush for 4.0 yards per attempt. That's 34 design carries, 21 rushes. I would normally say I wish the Iowa State offense and the brains behind it would rush their quarterback more, but I'm not sure if that's the answer. His backup.
Yeah. Again, Hunter Deckers rushes weird. Before we get to the other guy, because he also runs with the ball in his opposite hand and he moves his other hand. And it's just very odd.
Yeah.
He's a very odd looking player. Does that mean he's bad? I don't know. If I'm evaluating for the NFL, maybe I have some thoughts on that. If I'm saying, are you good enough to run the offense that Iowa State wants to run with the players that Iowa State has? I'm inclined to say that Hunter Deckers was actually fine. He was fine.
I
don't think that he was the reason they were bad last year.
I came into this podcast thinking that Parker was going to stand for Hunter Deckers, and everything he said has maybe want to reduce my grade, but we'll get to that. JJ Cole, his backup, is 6'7", 230 pounds. That is a large lad.
Yeah.
That is a big man. Mighty fella.
Yeah. I have nothing to add about that other than like he is a freakazoid, and at some point they're gonna bring him in. So I don't know. I think Deckers is good enough. I think there's a general equilibrium effect. They're going to be able to run more, take pressure off him. Like even in the run game, he's going to be able to give more because that's just going to be able to happen on those reads. He wasn't the problem last year, even as he found some reasons to struggle. I think the left-handed thing kind of throws people, and the oil play was prohibitively bad. I'm going to say that Deckers was still a project, but he's far from abysmal. I think he could still develop into a fine quarterback. I'm going 10 out of 15 on the room.
I think he actually stinks, and here's my evidence. 44% completion rate past 20 yards. 4 touchdowns to 1 pick. Fine, whatever. More crucially, 55% completion rate from 10 to 20 yards. 8 touchdowns, 10 picks. Parker, that is actively bad. I'm not sold. This tape is troubling. There's talent, sure. There's also worries. You rated him at a 10 out of 15. I have him as an 8 out of 15. That's enough said about Hunter Deckers because Parker's going to manipulate this podcast and talk about Hunter every week. We're going to move to running back and talk about Jarrell Brock, who is back at lead running back. 99 rushes last year before he got hurt. He had a foot injury. Only 2.7 yards out of contact. That's not great. He had 11 rushes over 10 yards. It's 1 of every 9. So good rate there. Here's a quick question, Parker. 6 foot tall, 220 pounds. I don't think that qualifies as brick shit house, but as backup
No, he's
does.
too fast. He's just a big boy. Newton is absolutely Newton's like what, 5'10", 215 or something?
5'11", 212. I think that's brick shit house. That's 1 inch shorter, 8 pounds lighter, but look at him. Man's a brick shit house. He's back as well. He kind of took over the lead role when Brock got hurt. 87 attempts, 3.6 yards per attempt, which is really bad. I'm going to get to that in a minute. 2.59 yards after contact. Only had 9 runs of 10-plus yards, and his longest was 20. So on 87 attempts, this running back, his longest rush was 20 yards. When Iowa State does run, it's 82% zone. I can't stress enough how boring this offense is. Like, they don't do anything to get their back into I've messed up that sentence. They don't do anything to get their backs into space and free them up. It's kind of like we have to run the ball eventually. So here's a run. They run 41%.
Last year, like 100%, it was desperation. It was just like, we actually can't pass every down. Especially when Brock went out, like it was just so bad. The offensive line didn't have any kind of play. And I don't think any of these guys behind Brock really could have any kind of burst. They put like Noel back there sometimes, and he just wasn't a great running back. Like it was a really bad situation. It was a very bad run room last year. Oh no, I think I lost Grant again. That's great. I'm going to talk about Hunter Deckers some more. Until Grant comes back, I'll talk about, I think that Brock is a dude. I think they missed a consistent run game, especially in the red zone. But are we sure that like Brock could have overcome the bad offensive line? I don't really know. I'm going to bank on a big bounce back year from him. He only had 2.7 yards after contact per attempt in 2022, but I'm sure that injury hampered that. Like that's really hard to overcome. I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10 for the line. I'm buying the upside of Brock. I think that they should have a more consistent run game. I'm going to go 8 out of 10 here.
I'm going to be a hater, I suppose. There's no explosiveness in this running back core. Like there's guys. Brock's a guy, but he's not a dude. I wish you could be somewhere else. We had a better offensive line, kind of a more impressive scheme. Parker, I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. I think the running back room stinks.
You are a hater.
I know, and it's only going to get worse because you're moving to wide receivers now. Xavier Hutchinson, who I have tagged as person who is no longer in Ames, accounted for 34% of Iowa State's targets last year. 1 out of every 3 balls thrown went to Xavier Hutchinson. So he had, again, I want to drive this home. 161 targets. Next closest was Jalen Noel at 86. And Hutchinson's average depth of target was 9.2 yards, right? So that's a guy that's going long. This guy's going short. Guy's a safety blanket, whatever. He was out wide, and Hunter Deckers could throw to Xavier Hutchinson. They also lose Sean That's a tough.
Sean Shaw is hard to say.
Yeah. She sells seashells by the seashore. Sean Shaw Jr., who was 6th on the team of targets, split wide guy. So the return Jalen Noel, great. Right? 5'10", 190, slot guy. 81.4% of the time, he lines up inside. He had 60 receptions on 86 targets. Decent rate. 6.8 average depth of target. 5.3 yards after catch. So he's catching in space and going. Happy for him. Dimitri Stanley is going to be probably thrown into the role that Hutchinson played. He's 6 foot 196, was out wide 94.1% of the time, had an average depth of target of 11.3 yards. So he's the deep guy. At tight end, you have Deshaun Hanika, 6'6", 238 unit. Wish I'm fighting to get down to that weight. I don't want to get in a fight with him, put it that way. His ADOT was 12.4, which is really impressive for a tight end, especially when that size. So catch the ball and fall down guy, right? Think about Mason Fairchild last week. We talked about Kansas. Same type of guy. They're bringing in Jaden Higgins from Eastern Kentucky. Parker, trivia question. What is Eastern Kentucky's mascot?
I am going to guess that is something military. I'm going to say Patriots.
Okay.
Patriots,
You're very
Colonels.
close. You're very close. It's Colonels. Like yeah, Colonels.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay, that's a good like Kentucky FCS school name.
Yeah.
That's good.
Very fine. But he's 6'4", 215, had 13 touchdowns and 1,151 yards last year in FCS ball. So he's going to be the other wideout. I really don't like this unit. That's my analysis.
It got worse. I mean, it was bad last year, and they lost Hutchinson, and it got worse. Yeah. They dropped a bunch of balls. They didn't create a lot of separation, and Noel kind of got wasted being the wrong kind of gadget guy just because they didn't have the bodies to play anywhere else. So I think that's fair to say that it's a rough unit. I don't know if Higgins is the shot in the arm that you want it to be, but like, again, if they can get any kind of run game, maybe these guys can breathe a little bit and somebody can be decent. But that's kind of hard. I think if Noel has the right role, Higgins alleviates from some pressure, they're going to need a lot of other tight ends, I think, to really kind of open this up. It's not great. It's not excellent. It wasn't good last year. I'm going 5 out of 10. I think this is my lowest grade for anyone on this team. I'm going 5 out of 10 for the wide receivers.
Okay. I think with the amount of dump off that Iowa State had last year, to where they couldn't rely, even with Xavier Hutchinson, on a deep ball. Jalen Noel's good, but there's so many question marks, a distinct lack of talent. This is probably the bottom of the recruiting cycle, but it's bad. Parker, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. This is a bad unit. This is really, really bad. It's
definitely, I think, it's not the limiting factor because the offensive line is the limiting factor.
Which
I don't know that the lack of that. I don't know the lack of athleticism in the wide receiver room is going to matter enough because the offensive line is going to be so important. So we'll see. We'll see if it gets to that point. Offensive line, not very good at all last year. 60.8 pass block grade, 60.9 run block grade. They had some injuries, guys like Downing, who's off the NFL. I mean, and then Jake Remsburg, who should take over one of the positions this year, was hurt last year, and so they get him back, and like maybe it'll be a little better. But again, the bodies are thin, and they're just not very good. If you're believing in this line, you're thinking that you trust Ryan Clanton in 1 year, in less than one offseason, to kind of make some changes. That's really hard. He says that he wants the guys to have bad intentions when they're playing the game. Basically what he's saying is we need some hating ass linemen, which again, the Purple Theory podcast very, very much agrees with the fact that every program needs some hating ass linemen.
I'll say this a lot. I want my linemen to have bad intentions is a hell of a line. I respect Ryan Clanton for that.
And what's interesting is I would urge the readers, I'm not going to like pull up a photo of him right now because I'm really not trying to dunk on him. I just love seeing a quote like that I think, oh, that is badass. Like I love it. And then seeing his photo and thinking that is not the gentleman that I thought would say that. Yeah, he's silly, man. I bet he and I could talk about like Hearthstone or something, right? Like I was just surprised. That's pretty cool. Although sometimes those offensive linemen are weird, right? Anyway, I don't think they ask a ton of this unit. We'll kind of gloss over it. I think it's going to be something like Hufford, Simmons, Traber, Remsburg, Ross are going to be the guys that play. Remsburg's good. Everybody else, Ross was a good run blocker. That's about all you can say for it. But they don't ask a ton of this unit. Last year, they were just incompetent. On their ass, literally and figuratively. If Clanton can come in and get some fire into them, maybe they'll bounce back. You have to imagine their health will improve. I'm going to vote for some positive regression here and say the best case scenario for this offensive line is fine. And so I'm going to say they're at a 9 out of 15 to start the season. That's about their ceiling for me. Okay.
First and foremost, I think positive progression would be the term because positive regression is impossible.
Well, regression to the mean. So if they performed on this, on a distribution and the means here,
Yeah,
they
they
were
regress
here,
into
I'd
the
expect
mean.
next
You
year.
know what? Here's the
you
deal.
regress, positive regression, whatever.
Parker and I are going to fight about definitions of how this works. Parker,
You know who regressed positively to the mean of our hearts? Open your Bibles, kids.
Wow. This unit is experience.
What's your grade?
This unit is experience. Parker, you want to say it with me? Experience is only good. Returning production is only good.
Only good when the production is good.
Yep. Production is good. I would not trust these guys to protect my dog. This is an 8 out of 15. It's a bad.
I love
4.
It's not good. They're not a great unit. I love this because I think what's interesting is I'm finding myself as I put the numbers down, like putting the grades down, I find myself being a little more positive than I think I normally would be. And I think you're being a little more negative, not in the sense that one of those is bad. I'm just interested in I love the exercise of putting numbers to paper. That's why we do it. Yeah. These are going to change. These are going to be wrong. It's just cool to get this thing here. Yeah. So that gives you a 29 out of 50 grade on the offense. And I have a
double checking. Yeah.
I have a 32 29. Out of 50 grade on the offense. Not much better, maybe a field goal, but not much better. And so even though we had some disagreements there,
bad news because we're going to the defense. This is John. We'll get to it. This is John Heacock's unit. Been the DC for a bit there at Iowa State. So I do want to credit Joseph Acosta at SB Nation.
Is that the homie JP Acosta?
Yes, I believe it is.
Yes, my man. Who follow him on Twitter? Good guy.
Who wrote a great article breaking down kind of what Iowa State does. But it's also he interviews our friend Cody Alexander, which hell yeah. Go read Match Quarters. I have it on my nightstand. Anyway, so they kind of run. It's a 3-3-5, but it's kind of a modified 3-3-5. The focus of the defense is on the shell on the back end, right, where they switch up the coverage, do whatever. Their main goal is to prioritize the best athletes on the field and get them involved. The problem, Parker, the best athletes have all left, especially on the back end, which is not good news for Iowa State. The defensive line holds up, but the rest I'm not sure about. So we're going to address a couple things. Key questions. Who's going to fill the roles at linebacker, right? There's 3 linebacking spots, 2 because Jerry Vaughn returns that need to be filled.
Doesn't Mike Rose still have some eligibility?
Dude, he's been there for 10 years. Somehow he's still not there. Orion Vance just left, and he was there when we first met at Big 12 Media Days, and he just left. Can the defensive line be as effective as it was last year? And just straight up, are there enough dudes? Are there enough athletes to make the 3-3-5 work? You and I both have experience talking about the 3-3-5 from last year, covering TCU. So curious to hear your takes, but take us to the
with a shout out to Coach Bass. The 3-3-5 that Iowa State runs is not the 3-3-5 that TCU runs.
Different.
Those are just 100%. Personnel. They're personnel 100%. Groupings. They're not. Yeah, they're different.
Yeah, they're different. Like I said, they're trying to maximize athletes, and I watching that defense, to me, the focus is on the back end. But anyway, so take us to the defensive line. What are we looking at? Who's back? Who's left? Etc.
Yeah. I'm trusting the turnover here. I'm saying this program has earned the benefit of the doubt on the defensive side of the ball to fill the holes and not completely fall off. So I'm going to be a little more optimistic about this defensive line. Isaiah Lee is still a dude on the inside. He's 6 foot 292. I think that is butterball status. I think I'm going to go ahead and apply that to him, but he's a big, strong dude.
I have a question about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Because Singleton is 6'2", 300, and you have him listed as stout. That is 2 inches and 10 pounds, 8 pounds.
Yeah, but the 2 inches matter a lot there. It's not exponential.
They do. I don't think Lee's a butterball. I think he's stout, but that's fine. Well,
they're both stout there. That tackle, and then Singleton plays like the heavier end kind of tackle guy, so he won't be the edge rusher. He'll still pressure, but it's kind of the stouter run fitting guy. Still kind of a question about who's going to take over at the edge. Onya Dim played a lot there, a little bit. Izogu and Menduzin, I believe is how you say both of those are guys that rotated through last year. Somebody has to step up, but the answer is going to be one of those guys has played in Campbell's system, played in Heacock's system for a couple of years, should be good to go. So I'm not worried about it. They had 133 pressures last year as an offensive line. They're a super disruptive unit, but they do a lot of non-statistical work in terms of funneling people towards the run fits, in terms of taking the edge off the linebackers. So they lost 2 NFL guys. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that losing Will McDonald is something you can just mitigate. But last year, I think I would have had them. We didn't do this exercise. I would have had this unit as a 14 or 15 last year. So I'm going to rank them. Probably I'm going to rank them a little bit lower with a legacy vote, but it's still pretty high, just because I think they've earned the benefit of the doubt. I don't think the ceiling's as high as last year, but they're pretty solid nonetheless. I'm going to go 11 out of 15 on the defensive line.
Okay. I like Heacock's scheme. I think he kind of plays around his lack of talent pretty well. But I am still a bit worried for the front, just because of the people that he lose. They're all system guys. That's not nothing. I mean, they fit the system. I just don't know if there's enough dudes there. So I'm going to give him a 10 out of 15. So 1 point lower than you, but yeah. Parker, I have real trouble with the linebacking core. Like to the point where I don't think it's like actually good.
Okay, again, legacy vote here, and they get a transfer in. I'm not burying them. I don't think it's amazing, but again, I think that I trust the continuity. I don't think they will be like the best unit in the Big 12, but in terms of total impact, I think they're going to be set up well, and they're going to have a really good defensive secondary to help them kind of move things around. And so I'm gonna be a little higher on them, I think.
That's fine. Can I make my argument? And you tell me where I've gone wrong.
Okay.
So Orion Vance, gone. Salute the King. He was one of the first people when we started writing about TCU football. I did a series for Frogs of War called Enemy at the Gates, and I wrote extensively about Orion Vance. That was in 2019, so he's been there for forever. Colby Reeder is also gone. He had the 3rd most snaps at linebacker. Kendall Jackson is gone, the 4th most snaps at linebacker. Who returns? You're asking. Jerry Vaughn, good linebacker. Decent pass cover. He lines up in slot occasionally, so into 3-3-5, he's going to be outside. He'll take the inside receiver if necessary, take the running back, etc. He also had the most tackles on the team, 54 tackles last year. Solid player. No worries there. There's nobody left. Will McLaughlin, his tackle grade on PFF, 38.3.
Yep.
But it's not as bad as Carson Willick, who had a 29.3. He had 4 missed tackles and 4 actual tackles, and also gave up 3 catches on 3 coverage reps. So again, I don't mean to pick on a kid. I'm saying that's the depth chart that Iowa State has at linebacker. They do add Zach Lovett from Missouri, who's a 3-star transfer, 6'2", 230, so big dude. But he played a lot of special teams with Missouri. He didn't start at linebacker or anything. It's probably better than what they got. So when you and I were filling out the depth chart for Iowa State this year, I have no idea who the 3rd guy is going to be. Parker, this is a bad unit. Tell me where I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad unit. I think it's a unit that's going to have some turnover. I think Vaughn is a good anchor. I think it's a unit where guys can play a little freer and looser, knowing that they have some help on the back end. And I think that a guy like Lovett, who's played, will provide a good body there. Lovett and McLaughlin specifically will be guys that potentially could break out. Looking at both McLaughlin and Willich, I think it's important to look at like total snaps.
Is it
when you look at the grades? They didn't play very much. 61 for Willick, and McLaughlin had 156. So not a ton. And they weren't good grades, but you've got to wonder, like, how many of those snaps were like when they were down 30-10 against TCU?
Sure.
And so some of that game state stuff matters. Also, this is a developmental program. Like, these guys are going to develop, and they're going to, so like McLaughlin, dude, poor kid. 4 snaps against SEMO, 15 against Ohio, 9 against Kansas, 2 against Kansas State, 24 against Texas, 42 against Oklahoma. Good luck, kid.
He also, he also, and again, I hate to pick on a kid. We're not picking on Will McLaughlin. He has 6 tackles and 5 missed tackles.
Yeah, it's not ideal. But I do think that situations matter there. And I believe in a developmental program like Iowa State to be able to get these defensive linemen or defensive linebackers to where they need to be. Again, we didn't know guys like Mike Gross, right? We didn't know who that was. We didn't know who Orion Vance was until he started being Orion Vance. So like, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. If you picked them up and plopped them on a different unit, on a different team, maybe their deficiencies would be a little more magnified. But generally for me, I'm going to say these guys have enough of a leash in the system that they're playing in, coupled with the development aspect of Campbell. I'm going to go ahead and give them an 8 out of 10 here.
Wow. This is going to be the biggest, I think, discrepancy that we have. This unit stinks, man. I have no confidence in them. The middle of the field should be open for anyone who wants to take it. Jerry Vaughn can be in a foxhole with me any day of the week, but that's a 4 out of 10, man.
Yeah, it's a 4. I disagree. I can see how it could be that bad. I don't think it is that bad. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've never been wrong. So we'll see how that works.
Let's burn through defensive ends or defensive backs. We still got to do schedule. And we've still got to do who we're doing next week. So I'll talk about this quickly. I think this is easy. This is a good unit.
The best named unit, I think, of any unit. Miles Purchase and TJ Tampa are incredible names. Yeah.
Pretty good names. While we talked, I actually bumped this up to a 9. I was just thinking about it a little more. So I have the cornerbacks or the defensive backs at a 9. Purchase in Tampa, most coverage snaps on the team last year at cornerback, 70 combined tackles, 51.2 and 46.5 receptions allowed totally. Purchase had no pass breakups. Tampa had 8. You have a very clear, like, kind of boundary and field, physical and running cornerback duo there. So I think they're really nice. In terms of they have the long guy who can match up and they have the short guy who can kind of be around the field. And then you bring back Freiler, who was kind of your run stopper. He was 3rd in tackles at that safety position, fill in those gaps, hard hitting guy. You'll see him flying to the ball. They do lose slot corner Anthony Johnson Jr. got drafted by Green Bay. Good for him. You could see Kyle or Cooper slot in here. It's going to be another Campbell guy. It's just going to be a guy. Somebody's going to step up and fill in there. They return a ton of the rotation. They have plenty of bodies even beyond Kyle and Cooper to replace Johnson. I'm going to call this the anchor of the defense, and I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10 here. I think this is a solid, consistent unit. I think they've raised the ceiling of this defense substantially.
Okay. I think 9 out of 10 is hasty, Parker. I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10. I think they're a solid unit, probably the best unit on the Iowa State defense, but I'm not sold on their especially at safety. Anyway. Okay. Do you want to do schedule? Do you want to launch into this?
So you had I had a 28 out of 35 on defense. You had a 21 out of 35 on defense. So I think that's going to end up being like our most glaring disagreement, I think. That I don't think Iowa State's defense is
also we have to give the coaching and special teams grade.
No,
there's no special teams. So
that's just
I
a far
docked
noise
Matt
to me.
Campbell a point there. I have it as a 9.
I have it as a 9 too. I just immediately said I gave Campbell all this coaching credit in the development of the defense, and then I took away 6 points because on average over the season, they're worth a dumb touchdown of special teams nonsense.
So this is very funny. You have Iowa State at a 69 rating. Nice. I have them at a 59. So
we are 10 points off.
We are. This will be a trend that we track across the rest of the season. So I have them at a 32.5 expected win percentage against the average FBS team and a 16.2% chance to make a bowl. You have them at a 61.9 average win percentage and an 87.3 chance to make a bowl.
But note that's that's win against an average team, and then probability of bowl if their schedule was filled with only average teams.
Yeah,
so that's not the case.
Right,
so it's not necessarily
yeah.
And I will say with these next week, Grant, I think we'll have enough teams on here we could like actually share this and people could see the graphic, and that'll be fun to kind of fill out. I have Iowa State as a 69. I have Kansas as a 63. That means that on a neutral field, I have Iowa State favored by 6. You have Kansas favored by 5 on a neutral field.
Yep.
Okay. And so we'll be able to test that this fall and update it. Yeah, and I think that's really fun. So should be really, really interesting to see how these kind of work out together. Yeah. Let's do schedule predictions. I actually put mine in here, but I'm going to change most of them, I think. So I'm going to delete mine.
I got to be honest with you. It's kind of scummy of you doing schedule predictions beforehand. We're supposed to do these reaction.
I know, but we were prepping. We were prepping really fast this afternoon.
We did a lot of work. I'm just saying. I don't.
And the best way to get a right answer is to write down the wrong answer. So that's kind of what I did here. Their over under is 5 and 5 or 5.5 right now, according to BetUS. So we're talking is bowl eligibility. Are they going to get there? All right, let's do it. You go first. I'll go after the slash. FCS Northern Ireland. Ireland. They're playing IRA, actually. I have them as a win against Northern Iowa, even though they still have an offensive coordinator and gave the Panthers something to fight about.
Come out, you black and tans. And then
I think I lost your audio there.
Oh, can you hear me now?
What great timing. Yeah, your mouth's moving. Nothing's happening.
Oh,
this is truly the worst Big 12 podcast that has ever happened. Okay, so Northern Iowa, I'm going to say win. I think they lose to Iowa overall. Ohio, a MAC team, that's going to be a win. Grant has this. Are they playing at Ohio? I should look at this. Iowa State.
Can you hear me now?
Schedule 2023. I still can't hear you. I'm just kind of rolling until I can.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Until I can hear you.
Keep talking. Let's see.
Iowa State football schedule 2023. I would unplug your microphone and try again so we can go from there. They are playing at Ohio. Who? Why? How? When and where? Yep. No, I still don't have you. I'm gonna mute you in here. I'm gonna unmute you.
I was muted.
I'm gonna take you off the broadcast. Show my face, and I'm going to bring you back. Anything?
Can you hear me now?
No, nothing. Okay, well, happens. Technology is technology. No big deal. Kind of annoying for us there, but that's something that we are just trying to figure out. No big deal. I'm going to keep walking through the schedule. Grant, if you joined, you can give me yours. Otherwise, we'll tweet them out or something. Or tweet our final records. If you want to enter yours into the Google Doc, Grant, I could read those off. I think that would be a solution where we could work from there and then kind of go from there. So I heard a little something, but then nothing. I have Northern Iowa as a win. I have there you go. I got you.
There we go. Oh, I just had a curse word.
Sweet, we're back.
We're back.
I didn't hear it.
I do hope that everyone that is listening or watching to this can now understand what it's like to be in the Purple Theory podcast. Northern Iowa, that is a win for Iowa State. Iowa is a loss for Iowa State. You were talking about this, and I was somehow muted. Playing at Ohio is insane. I don't know why Iowa State is going to Athens.
Understand why they're doing that.
Yeah, I don't get it either. So we're now in Stillwater, correct?
Yes. So we're both 2-1. We agree.
Yeah, Oklahoma State. Yep. Oklahoma State's a loss.
I think since it's in Ames, I'm tempted to call it a win.
Okay.
I think I'm going to go win 3-1. Yeah, I'm going to go win. You go. You're saying loss. I'm saying win. Okay.
I think this team stinks. They are at Oklahoma the next week. I think that is a loss.
Yep. Actually, no, that's good. Okay, I'm gonna go. I don't think I'm gonna kind of hedge. They don't beat Oklahoma State and TCU. I don't care which one it is. So I'm gonna go hosting TCU. I'm gonna go loss there just because I picked win for Oklahoma State. I don't think they beat both of those teams.
Okay. I think they beat TCU. So give me win there.
Okay.
At Cincinnati, I think that's a win. Yeah. Scott Satterfield wants to be Matt Campbell. At Baylor,
that podcast is going to be dismal. We're going to have to we're going to have to listen to happy music or something.
Yeah, I know. At Baylor's a loss for me.
Yeah, I think I agree. They're losing there.
Kansas at home, I think both of us had that as a loss for Kansas last week. So I'll go win for Iowa State. Because we had Kansas on like a 7-game losing streak. Yeah,
that got depressing. Okay, I'm going to go win there.
BYU stinks. It's at BYU. I'll coin toss and say loss.
We are agreeing on most of these. I think I'm going to say loss on the road at BYU.
Yeah. Home for Texas. I think Texas will be rolling because they'll put Arch Manning in at quarterback. That is a loss for Iowa State.
Oh, yeah, I agree. So that puts them going 1-3 headed to the Kansas State game at the end of the season.
Which is a loss. So I have them at 1, 2, 3, 4. I have them. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, 1. 2, I can't count. 1, 2.
I think we both have them at 5 and 7.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. That is disappointing. That feels like a bummer. That feels like worse than I think they'll be. If I had to pick the over, I'd still think over. I still think that like the losses that I have. Iowa, Baylor, BYU, Kansas State, Texas. No way those are all losses. My probability on those is the margin on that is super thin. There's no way. So I would say over, even though I'm projecting a 5.5 straight up. If we did this by probabilities, I think I would say over 5.5. I think they go to a bowl.
I think they stink. And I think 5 is optimistic, but that is my take. Parker, are you excited to learn what team we're going to preview next week? Have everybody lined up?
Yeah, we should.
I have the randomizer.
We should do that.
Okay.
I'm gonna put it in the spreadsheet so that we know.
Yeah, I have it. Are you ready?
Yeah.
3,
drum roll, please.
2, 1. TCU. How about that?
Oh, very fun. All right, TCU.
All right, there you go.
Doing the Frogs next week. That'll be a lot of fun. Again, we've never done one of these like this for TCU.
Yeah.
Kind of the outsider's perspective. So I think this will be fun to kind of treat them as an exercise and see where we land and put some fresh eyes on them. So should be a lot of fun. Also, it works out well. Will be a light prep week for us in terms of reviewing film and stuff because we're familiar with last week.
Turns out we know the personnel.
Should be kind of okay. Yeah. I'll say right now, I'll give us 15 minutes at the beginning to talk about how stupid TCU has been this offseason and how absolutely idiotic the program has kind of been. And then we'll hit a timer and say, all right, we're done with it. And then we'll talk about TCU objectively. So if you want to fast forward through that, you guys are more than welcome to, but know that we'll segment it off and then we'll just talk about the football objectively like we have with every other team.
I don't think we need 15. We can boil it down to 5, man, because it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, probably 5.
Yeah. Yes, that is the plan for next week. Parker, you are optimistic on the Iowa State Cyclones, which is a sentence I never thought I would say.
Well, optimistic to the tune of 6 wins. So,
my name is Grant McGalliard. You can find me on Twitter at Grant McGalliard, spelled like it sounds with all those vowels. He is Parker Fleming. He is at Stats of War on Twitter. He's considering paying for Twitter Blue, which I will stop this podcast if that happens. We are part of the Republic of Football Podcast Network. with Dave Campbell's Texas Football, and we're very proud to be so. You can watch us on YouTube. You can listen to us on anywhere you get your podcast. And we'll be back next week to talk about some more. So, good night.